Hey everyone, welcome back. For those of you who are new here, my name is Brittany. I'm a health coach and nutritionist, and my channel is all about helping you to create delicious low FODMAP meals to improve your digestive health. If you're into it, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be putting out a new video each week. So today I thought we would do something a little bit different, and instead of a recipe tutorial, I thought we could sit and have a chat about FODMAPs, what they are, how they contribute to IBS, and how the low FODMAP diet works. So I've got my tea here, I've got my notes, and this is going to be a longer video, so if you want to grab yourself some tea and something to take notes and come back, it's going to be very informative, well worth your time. So first, why am I so passionate about the low FODMAP diet? It is the only clinically proven therapeutic diet for the treatment of IBS, and it has a 75% success rate. Those are great odds, and that's what I told myself when I was having a lot of issues with my digestive health and I wasn't sure what I should do and what I should try. I don't want to get too much into my story today, but I am thinking of doing another video on that for you guys, so if you're interested, let me know in the comments below. So FODMAP is an acronym that represents a group of short-chain carbohydrates that are poorly digested in the intestine and then can lead to IBS issues. So normally when we eat, we start to break down our food in our stomach. It then moves on into the small intestine where it's continued to be broken down and then absorbed. Like I mentioned, FODMAPs are poorly absorbed, so they have the opportunity to stick around in the small intestine and start to cause issues. The first of those being that they are hydrophilic, meaning that they love water. They're going to draw in a lot of excess water into the small intestine and cause swelling. So next, when they move on to the large intestine, they're actually going to feed the bacteria that normally live there and produce gas through a process known as fermentation. So if you think about fermented beverages like beer or kombucha, you can see how all of that liquid and gas together can build up a lot of pressure. And you don't want to have all that pressure inside your intestines. That's not going to be very comfortable. So that's actually going to cause your intestines to expand, which is going to cause a lot of pain, and it's also going to cause a lot of bloating. So do FODMAPs affect everyone in this way? Yes and no. While everyone goes through the process that I just laid out, people without IBS are only going to experience minor symptoms. They might have slight discomfort or be a little bit gassy or bloated, but generally they'll be okay. It's not the whole ordeal that it is for people with IBS. So for those of us with IBS, we're going to experience a lot more pain throughout this entire process due to the sensitization of the nerves that line the digestive tract. These nerves help to make up the enteric nervous system, which is also known as the second brain. So this system also regulates peristalsis, which is a smooth wave-like motion that helps to move the contents of our intestines from one end to the other. So in people with IBS, this movement can be disrupted and cause motility issues. So for some people, their intestines are going to move too fast, which is going to cause a lot of urgency and diarrhea, especially with all of that excess water in there. For other people, their intestines are going to move too slowly, which is going to cause constipation. These two can alternate depending on the composition of the microbiome. So now that we've talked a little bit about FODMAPs and how they contribute to IBS, let's dive into the actual molecules. So like I mentioned, FODMAPs are an acronym that represents short-chain carbohydrates, which is just a fancy scientific way of saying sugar. But that does not mean that FODMAPs are only found in sweet foods. They're actually found in plants and dairy products. So when we think about foods that are predominantly made out of carbohydrates like broccoli or potatoes, they're composed of long-chain carbohydrates, and then they are broken down in the body into short-chain carbohydrates. So that's where you're going to get the FODMAPs. So first, F is for fermentable. We went over that. Next, we have oligosaccharides, which is broken into two subcategories. The first of those being fructans or fructooligosaccharides. Now, this is the category that actually gives me the most trouble, and it's made out of things like garlic, onions, wheat, barley, and rye, just to name a few. The next subcategory is known as galactans or galactooligosaccharides. These are found in legumes, so things like beans, lentils, and then also cashews and pistachios. So next we have disaccharides, which pertains to lactose, which is the sugar found in milk. But that doesn't mean that you have to give up dairy products entirely. There's actually a lot of naturally low lactose dairy products, one of them being butter. So when you make butter, you are going to skim the cream off of the top of the whole milk, and that cream is 99% fat. So since there's hardly any carbohydrates in it, there's not going to be any, well, not very much lactose in there. You do want to stick with a high quality butter though, because I feel like that process can be a little sloppy in manufacturers that aren't taking the time to skim carefully, and then you can actually get butter that has more lactose in it than it should. Another naturally low lactose dairy product is hard cheese, and again, this is due to the processing. So when you make cheese, you're going to add a starter bacterial culture to the milk. These bacteria are actually going to convert the lactose in the milk into lactic acid. So, and when I say hard cheese, that pertains to anything that has completely gone through this conversion process. So hard cheeses are everything from Parmesan and Romano all the way to like a very soft, like fresh mozzarella. It's actually, it's technically a hard cheese. So, and you've got everything in the middle like cheddar, Jack, Gouda, all that good stuff. So soft cheeses are cheeses that have not fully gone through this conversion process, and they can actually have a lot of lactose left over in the cheese. So these are like cream cheese, ricotta, mascarpone, burrata, things like that. The same goes for yogurt as well. You will find some lactose-free yogurts and cream cheeses at the store, in addition to lactate milk. These are just products that have had lactase enzymes introduced into them, so it's easier for your body to break down. These are okay on a low FODMAP diet. I'm not a milk drinker myself, but I do use lactate in my cooking and in my coffee and stuff like that, and I never have a problem with it. Next, we have monosaccharides, which pertains to fructose, more specifically the ratio of fructose to glucose. You want an even 1-to-1 ratio. Studies have found when you have an excess of fructose, your body can actually malabsorb it, and it can cause issues. So this is found in things like apples, asparagus, honey, and high fructose corn syrup, of course. So that's going to be one of the reasons why processed foods are really difficult on the body. They're filled with high fructose corn syrup. So lastly, we have polyols, which are sugar alcohols. It does not mean that they're found in things like vodka and tequila. It actually just means that there's an alcohol group on the end of the sugar molecule. You don't really need to know that. What you do need to know is that they're found in mushrooms and stone fruits like peaches, plums, and nectarines. They're also found in artificial sweeteners, so things like sorbitol, mannitol, xylitol. So the low FODMAP diet works by temporarily reducing the amount of these short-chain carbohydrates in the diet in order to reduce symptoms. This is known as the elimination phase, and it can last anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. I typically recommend 6 weeks for my clients because not only does it help to reduce the inflammation and irritation and then jumpstart the healing process, but it's also just nice to have a break after being so symptomatic for so long. So, are we completely eliminating FODMAPs from the diet? No. It's a low FODMAP diet, not a no FODMAP diet. And that is because it is important to have a little bit of fiber in your diet and to have as much diversity in your diet as possible to make sure you're getting all of the micronutrients. So what that means is this diet is all about serving sizes. So the researchers at Monash University in Australia, the institution that created this diet, they tested a wide variety of foods to see how many FODMAPs are in each food, and then they tested their patients to see at what levels these FODMAPs start to cause symptoms. So if you've done any research on the low FODMAP diet, you've probably come across websites that have these different charts. They have like a green column, a yellow column, and a red column. There are a lot of apps that do this too. This is a green light system, and I actually really like it. It's very intuitive. Like obviously, like you don't have to be too careful with all the foods in the green category, which are low FODMAP foods. Then the yellow category is like a little bit of caution there. It's a moderate FODMAP serving. And then for the red column, those are foods that are likely going to cause issues. And those are the high FODMAP foods. So I really like this green light system because it's very intuitive to use. But there is one thing that can be a little bit confusing, and that is sometimes you'll see one food that's in both the red category and the green category. And that is because in a normal serving, this food would be high FODMAP, but they've actually measured it out to see at what amount it would be a low FODMAP serving. So for example, like a regular serving of asparagus would be like 5 or 6 spears, and that's gonna be high FODMAP. But they've actually measured it out and found that half a spear of asparagus is a low FODMAP serving. And while so that's pretty annoying. Like I just didn't eat asparagus for my entire elimination phase, but it is technically allowed. I don't have one of these charts on my website just yet, but I will link to a couple down below that I have found very helpful. The other thing that I found tremendously helpful is the Low FODMAP app by Monash. I think it was like $8, which is well worth it. They actually put all of that money back into IBS research, which is really nice. And like I mentioned before, Monash is the authority on FODMAPs, and they are constantly testing more foods and regularly updating the app. I actually just saw that they got a bunch of new Indian ingredients, so that's really exciting because you guys know I love my curries. So now that we've talked a bit about what we're going to be eliminating from the diet or restricting, let's talk about what you can eat on a low FODMAP diet, because I find it's much more helpful to focus on the things that you can't eat, it's much more helpful to focus on the things that you can eat instead of the things that you can't. So for the elimination phase, we're gonna be focusing on foods that have no FODMAPs or are low FODMAP. And like I mentioned, FODMAPs are found in plants and dairy products, so meat is completely fine on this diet. You don't have to worry about it causing symptoms. So that's, chicken, turkey, fish, shellfish, beef, veal, all of that stuff, eggs, all of it. The one thing you are gonna wanna watch out for are the ingredients in processed meats like deli meats and sausage, because they can contain high FODMAP ingredients like garlic and onion. Another thing that we don't really have to worry about on this part of the diet is our vegetable oils. So even though they are vegetable-based, they are made entirely of fat, so they don't have any carbohydrates in there. So for starches, we're gonna be sticking to gluten-free starches like rice, white potatoes, quinoa, gluten-free pasta, gluten-free bread, corn tortillas, buckwheat, millet. So you see, just talking about all the meats and all the starches, there's already quite a bit of variety. Fruits and vegetables, however, that's where things can get a little bit tricky. So there are quite a few FODMAP-free vegetables like cucumber, vine tomatoes, and carrots, also leafy greens. And then for fruits, it's gonna be mainly citrus fruits and then a few berries. But like I mentioned before, check out the table below to get a full list. We're also gonna be sticking to 1 low FODMAP serving of a high FODMAP food per meal. So for example, if you have chicken and rice as your base, and then you're gonna have spinach and tomato, those are all FODMAP free. You can add a low FODMAP serving of broccoli, which is gonna be 3/4 cup. That's a full meal. And I know that elimination diets are by definition restrictive, but that's kind of where I come in. It doesn't have to feel restricted if you learn how to do it in the right way. So there are a few foods that are technically allowed on the low FODMAP diet that I do recommend my clients to eliminate completely. Those being glutinous grains, which are wheat, barley, and rye mostly, and dairy products. So gluten and dairy are highly inflammatory. And most people who are suffering with IBS are dealing with a lot of inflammation. So I think it's helpful to just eliminate those from the diet completely and then add them back in later. Eliminating those two things are going to help to knock down the inflammation in the system and help to encourage healing faster. Also, a lot of people these days have problems with gluten, and there are a lot of other components in dairy that can cause sensitivities. So I just think it's good to be extra cautious. So I know for me personally, the toughest restriction on the low FODMAP diet is having to eliminate garlic and onion completely. I have come up with a couple of workarounds for that, and I have another video where I get into that more in depth, so check it out. It's my low FODMAP garlic oil video. I'll link it somewhere. So now that we've been in the elimination phase for a few weeks and we've gotten our symptoms down to a manageable level, it's time to move into the reintroduction phase, which is the most difficult phase of this diet, but it's also the most important. It's gonna help give you the self-knowledge necessary to help eliminate your food fears and to have the most diversity in your diet possible. So there are 10 weeks of challenges, one for each category of FODMAPs. Each week you're gonna pick one food that contains one FODMAP and then introduce it in 3 different amounts over the week. So for example, if we're testing lactose this week, we're gonna choose milk as our testing food. So on day 1, we're gonna start with a low FODMAP serving of milk, which is 1 tablespoon. You can either just drink it or put it in your coffee, move on with your day. If you don't have any symptoms or have only minor symptoms, you're gonna wanna move on to the next test on day 3. And that is because we're testing on days 1, 3, and 5 of the week to give a full 48 hours for any food reactions to pop up, because sometimes they can be delayed. So if you don't have any reactions, you're moving on to test 2, which is going to be a 1/4 cup of milk. So you can either just drink it or you can treat yourself to a cappuccino, something like that. And then if again you don't have any symptoms or only very minor symptoms, you wanna move on to the 3rd test, which is 1 cup of milk. So you can either just drink that again or use it in a recipe, something like that. But if you do that, you wanna make sure you eat the entire recipe so that you're getting like the full amount. And if after that you don't have any more symptoms, then congratulations, you are not lactose intolerant. So if you do have any reactions during this whole test, you wanna make sure to record them in your food journal. Data collection is going to be very important during this phase of the diet. You'll see when we move on to the next phase. So if you had a bad reaction after the 2nd test, then you don't need to move on to the 3rd. You'll know that that is your limit now. Okay, so after your 10 weeks of challenges and all of your data collection, you're gonna move on to the maintenance phase, which is where we're gonna take all of that data and decide which foods and in what amounts you're gonna add them back into your diet. To continue our example, if you are looking at all of the reactions that you've had in your food journal and you had no reaction to milk whatsoever, then you're gonna be able to completely add that back into your diet. If you see that you had a reaction to the high FODMAP serving of, say, avocado, then you wanna make sure to add back only a moderate or low FODMAP amount of avocado per meal. And then if you see that you had a reaction to the low FODMAP serving of, let's say, peas, then you can either retest it with half of the amount of the low FODMAP serving or just eliminate it from your diet completely. So this is the formula that we're using to develop our maintenance diet. Is maintenance forever? Yes and no. I've been on my maintenance diet for over 2 years now, and it's working really well for me. My digestion's way better than it used to be. But I did notice that my tolerance level changed as my gut continued to heal. So at first I was only able to tolerate like 2 tablespoons of avocado, and now I can eat like half an avocado in one sitting, which is like really nice because we all love avocado. The other thing is that when I do get flare-ups, like maybe like once or twice a year, I will go back to a strict low FODMAP diet to help my body kind of calm itself and reduce symptoms and, you know, encourage healing and reduce inflammation. And then after a few weeks, I'll go back to my maintenance diet. I'll skip the reintroduction phase entirely. I found that to work really well for me. So I know the low FODMAP diet can be complicated, especially with all of the different serving sizes and everything, but I hope this video helps to break it down in a coherent way and help you feel less intimidated. I have given you everything you need to do a low FODMAP diet on your own, but I also do health coaching, so if you'd like a little bit extra guidance, I will leave my contact information below if you want to schedule a free consultation. All right, so let's quickly review what we've learned today. So FODMAP is an acronym that represents a group of short-chain carbohydrates that are found in plants and dairy products. So the low FODMAP diet has 3 phases: elimination, reintroduction, and maintenance. The elimination phase works by temporarily limiting the amount of FODMAPs in the diet in order to reduce symptoms. The reintroduction phase is where we come and test these FODMAPs to find where our personal limits are. It can be a pain in the butt, but it's super important to learn where your limits are so that you can eliminate your food fears and to diversify your diet as much as possible. That is the goal in all of this. You want to eat as normal as possible. And then third, maintenance is where you take all of that data that you've collected and use it to determine what you should eat and in what amounts. I know this has been a long video. Thank you all for sticking with me. Leave me a comment and let me know what tea you're drinking. I'm curious to see how many of you made it through to this point. Like I mentioned before, I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope it's been able to sort of demystify the low FODMAP diet. And I hope it kind of explains like why I cook the way that I do on this channel. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, follow me on Instagram if you want to see how I manage my IBS on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next week.